Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another show of the Legends of Philosophy of Science. I'm Arup K, Chatterjee, and I'm joined by my colleague, Professor Sudip Patra. Sudip, how have you been?
Hello, yeah. It has been quite some time that
Mhm.
we did this
Yeah.
episodes, but I think that as the last time it was quite interesting to
Hmm.
interact. I think we left out at Einstein and Tagore.
Exactly. So, you and I have been going through this, path-breaking book. Is it all right to call it path-breaking? This is we are talking about Kieran Fox's "I Am Part of Infinity," the spiritual journey of Albert Einstein. And Kieran Fox is a trained neuroscientist, a cognitive scientist, and he has written this very interesting book, which you and I have exchanged notes on, and which has stimulated our thoughts. So, interestingly, we left, or we thought that we were closing one chapter with the Tagore and Einstein dialogues, but those dialogues never seem to go away. So Einstein has been brought back, he's been plunged back into the world of spirituality, which I don't think either people of theology or people of material sciences would like very much. So, what is your opinion on Karen Fox's book?
Yeah, when I first got the book in my hands, I thought that perhaps it is something again like stereotypical books written on Einstein. But then I found that the author has really gone very deep. So one thing is very clear that Einstein was always like anti-authority
Mm,
from his childhood even.
mm,
Therefore, there is no question of kind of following any theologist path or any
mm,
religious path. Rather, he was very, very against any kind of religious dogma throughout his life.
mm, mm,
Therefore, the whole book really tries to explain what is the meaning of spirituality for
mm,
Einstein. And there comes in a lot of connections. So certainly Spinoza is there, Spinoza's spirituality, Spinoza's pantheism, and
mm,
so on.
mm,
But along with these also Eastern connections. So that is a quite a kind of
mm,
revelation, I should
mm,
say. May not be directly, but Einstein came to contact with Chinese philosophy,
mm,
even Indic philosophies in some sense, and he had deep reverence for all of these lines of thinking.
mm.
So this particular book is an eye opener, and I will say that it is an important work in that direction.
I was actually after a long time, Sharif, I was going through the poem "The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock." It was written by Thomas Stearns Eliot, and it marks the heyday of the modernist movement in Britain, Europe, and modernism is mostly defined as this movement, literary movement, comprising Bohemians, the Bloomsbury Group, and some scientists were also now and then interested to join this group. But essentially, modernism also has a lot of borrowings from the East, and this is generally not well highlighted.
Mm.
Apart from the very well-known fact that T.S. Eliot's, if you pardon the Freudian slip, T.S. Eliot's *The Wasteland*, it ends by referencing the Upanishads, and the last words of the wasteland are Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. But apart from these, big canonical facts, there are multiple nuances within modernism, wherein modernism draws a lot from Chinese philosophy and Indic philosophy, particularly Upanishads, the the haikus that inspired the modernists are, very very obvious in their poetry. Now, when so going back to the modernists, it made me wonder what was Einstein's relationship with the East, and by that I mean Eastern texts. What was his relationship with Tagore, with Gandhi? These things are more or less better documented. But did Einstein ever think about sacred geographies? Did Einstein think about the sacred at all? What do you think? I mean, you have told us that Einstein was anti theological, he was anti authoritarian, but there's a difference between the holy and the sacred. There's a difference between religion,
Mm.
organized religion, and spirituality. So Kieran Fox seems to suggest that Einstein was a deeply spiritual man. What would you say?
Yes, I think that when I was reading the book more deeply, maybe the second reading, I should say, I found that Einstein, first of all, historically was influenced by Spinoza. Now, again, if we dig deeper into Spinoza's own influences, it seems that it goes back at least till Pythagoras and Pythagoreans, basically. Now, again, if you dig into the life of Pythagoras, whatever little we know about that great philosopher, even earlier to Plato and Aristotle,
Mm,
it seems that Pythagoras might have some connection with the Eastern philosophies of his times. Might be that he knew about that through some connections, or he might have traveled to some other places, Near East at least. Now, therefore, this tradition of European thinking that really has some interesting connections with Eastern philosophies. And as we have very rightly suggested, this episode is not very well highlighted, and that needs to be highlighted. For example, this whole idea about pantheism, that there is only one substance which is basically expressed through millions of forms and shapes. In Vedantic tradition, we know that there is this very similar philosophy, that nama and rupa.
mm,
So all objects and forms are just like nama and rupa of the same Brahman, or the same kind of substance, or no thing rather than substance, I should say. By no thing we means that not a thing, not nothing. So therefore, Pythagoras and Pythagoreans were also influenced by that kind of a thinking, and then that went through ages and ages, and then reached Spinoza in a very different way than Descartes. So Descartes, these to my mind are like kind of two alternative models. So one is like kind of res potentia and res extensia, if you like to say, mind and matter in some sense, and there's a kind of divide between them, and we do not know how one interacts with the other. And that has further given rise to today's very strong emergentist tradition, matter first and then mind emerging. On the other hand, we have completely an alternative tradition of pantheism, and one substance, one thing, if you like to say. And it seems that Einstein was rather influenced by this thinking rather than mind matter divide. It may seem like that okay, Einstein was a physicalist and Einstein was only thinking about physics and physics first, that kind of thing. This book, if you really read into that, it seems that he was deeply spiritual, and yes, he was aware of the fact that, or perhaps he thought that physics is central to all of the being, all of it. But that doesn't mean that we understand physics, all of it. For example, we also have to keep in mind that Einstein was thinking about a unified field theory. So physics as field only, nothing else. Now that might also could have been extended to consciousness and mind, but Einstein didn't have the time to get into all that.
So after reading Fox's "I'm Part of Infinity," I had a Keatsian moment, a kind of moment that John Keats underwent when he encountered Homer for the first time. And Keats was a very self-avowed Hellenist. He was deeply Grecian, so he used to borrow a lot from Grecian Greek imagery and Greek fables and the arts and the aesthetics of the Greeks really appealed to John Keats. So John Keats was a romantic. I don't think I'm romantic at all in my scholarly approach or in my let's say poetical approaches. But nevertheless, there is a little bit of Tagorean romanticism in me, which is very different from European romanticism, and that led me to write this poem, whose title is modeled after one of Keats's poems, and Keats's poem was titled "On First Looking into Chapman's Homer." So he was referring to Chapman and his interpretation of Homer. So I titled my poem as on first uh, looking into Fox's Einstein. So uh, Anyhow, and when you took a look at the poem, you first of all you complimented it, and then you said that I tend to lay a lot of focus on silence, and you brought up Wittgenstein. Would you like to talk us through what I mean, your chain of thoughts?
Yes.
What about Wittgenstein? What about Einstein is connected by silence?
Yeah, it's a very deep question.
Mm,
Let me try to do that. So, if we go back to Wittgenstein, one thing is very clear that when Wittgenstein was actually asked about his works,
mm, mm.
say Tractatus or
Yeah.
other things, he was very much clear about this thinking that there are two parts of his works. One part which was published and one
Mhm,
part which was never published. And that part
mhm.
which was never published, that was more important to him. And in that sense, silence,
Very
it
interesting.
plays a very important role in his
Mm,
philosophy. And we are all aware of the last line of Tractatus that,
mm,
where you cannot really speak clearly,
mm.
then that should be passed in
Passed over in
silence.
silence.
Yeah,
Very, very interesting.
yeah.
Just to trigger you or maybe stimulate you. I mean, this is not an interruption. It just made me think. Are you so in the social sciences and in the academia nowadays? You will find the notion of the other as very important. So either uh, somebody is being accused of otherizing someone, or somebody is being advised to become like the other or to accommodate the other. Now, the other could be almost anything. It could be based on gender, race, caste, community, whether you are human or non-human. So there's an otherness to everything. Did you, by some subconscious connection, seem to identify silence as the other of knowledge? And I would like to now bring you back to Einstein. So you're saying that, and you're rightly saying that Wittgenstein thought what was not published was dearer to him because it's in the realm of silence. Is that the other of knowledge? And how do we connect Einstein, Tagore back to knowledge? What is the problem in our knowledge societies? What kind of knowledge are we producing, and what are the pitfalls of this kind of knowledge production? What does Einstein's spirituality, according to you, what does Tagore's spiritual mission, according to you, tell us about our knowledge production?
Yes, I think these are very, very deep and urgent questions. There's no
Mm,
doubt about that. It will really take more time to
mm,
elaborate on this. As far as of now, what I am trying to think is that there is not much difference between silence and knowledge to my mind.
mhm,
Rather, one may say that true knowledge, whatever it may be, is silence in some sense. For example, in our Indic traditions, if you think about the concept of Sat-chit-ananda,
mm,
so Sat-chit-ananda is basically a whole. It cannot be broken into parts,
mhm,
and therefore it is very difficult to say something about it.
mm,
So, we also have this particular word anirvachaniya.
mm,
So, anirvachaniya is something which is literally beyond words.
mm,
And that is the state, or that is the point where, all the great sages would like to go. And that was real spirituality for them.
mm,
So spirituality was not like this modern babas that
mm,
we
mm,
find nowadays. Now the problem is that, as far as I see that in our current education system, whether
mhm,
European or we have more or less adapted that,
mhm,
there it is very difficult to think about silence. There it is very difficult to cultivate the
mhm,
culture of silence. You
mm,
have to speak up, you have to say something, and that is the identity. And
mm,
identity politics comes in there. You have to be vociferous.
mm,
If you are not, then certainly you are not doing anything.
mm,
I think that that is a very problematic thing, because most of the best minds, so whether it is Wittgenstein or Rabindranath or even Einstein, I think they, in heart, they were giving more emphasis into the profound importance of silence. And even philosophers like Jiddu Krishnamurti, so he was always emphasizing on this, that we need to understand silence. So that is unfortunately not in our education system. We are becoming too much noisy. That is the problem.
Well, I think I will need to tease a little more out of you on that some other day. But you and I have also been having conversations about several other scientific minds. And so maybe let's go back to Europe and let's go back to the 1920s and 30s. What was happening in the various schools of quantum mechanics? Why don't you walk us through that? But more importantly, why don't you tell us about somebody who Einstein thought would become his successor, and that is Wolfgang Pauli. So,
Yeah.
who is Wolfgang Pauli, and what is Pauli's relationship with Carl Jung, the psychologist, and how does Carl Jung, the Swedish psychoanalyst, the student of Sigmund Freud, how does he enter the quantum mechanics dialogue?
Mm. Yes, fascinating.
Hmm.
So let's go back a bit to 1920s,
Okay.
particularly 1925, more
Mhm.
technically.
Mhm.
Though I always believe that 1924 is equally important when Satyam Bose writes to Albert Einstein, and there's a birth of quantum statistics that
Mhm.
itself has become a huge literature. But in 1925, we have young Heisenberg. So visiting Helgoland, and he was suffering from hay fever, and he just wakes up throughout the whole night and tries to solve hydrogen atom spectrum. And in the wake of dawn, he comes up with some very strange and absurd looking mathematics which he himself could not understand. So he actually wrote that it was something like laundry list for him. So he was basically just writing arrays of numbers, and through that it came out that he might have given some deeper insight into hydrogen atom spectrum. That was the birth of quantum mechanics. Now, very soon you see that all great minds realize that something interesting is happening here. So, most of the classical physical principles, classical mechanical principles were seem to be outdated or say kind of violated. We can talk a lot into that, but today we are mainly looking into the philosophical implications of that. So Niels Bohr, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Max Born, Dirac came into from the mathematical perspective, and many many others. Jordan, and then certainly later on Neumann, John von Neumann, the mathematical prodigy. All of them, they kind of started playing very important role in the journey of quantum mechanics. However, one has to keep in mind that they were also very different from each other. At times we lump them together and say it is Copenhagen and something. That is not true. For example, Schrödinger was very much dissatisfied with the concept of entanglement, which was coming through his own works. So he was so pissed off that he wrote to Einstein that did I know that this will happen, I would have severed my relation with quantum mechanics. So it was so much because they were coming from a classical mindset, and it was difficult to get around that what is happening. Now, in that tradition, as you have rightly said, that Pauli joined very soon, and Pauli was a kind of like a boy wonder, one would say. So he was a prodigy by any means. So he wrote the first paper in high school, and his first paper was on general theory of relativity. So you can understand, and that really shocked Einstein. Einstein was totally wondering that what is this. So maybe an ire has come, who can only be compared with Einstein only. Now, over time, Einstein was more and more attracted towards his brilliance, Pauli's brilliance. Though I will say that Pauli was very much into quantum physics, Einstein was, I won't say he was not. He perhaps thought about quantum physics more than relativity, but his philosophy was different. But it is true that later on, as you have rightly said, that Einstein publicly announced that Pauli can be his intellectual successor, and that's a big deal, and Pauli himself was very surprised and admired that. Now comes Pauli and Jung. So Jung, as you have rightly said, another prodigy. First of all, he starts with Freud, but then breaks out, and he has his own way of thinking. You can perhaps highlight more on that. His unique way of thinking about psychology. So Pauli goes to Jung, and then it was all in 1930s and 40s. So he goes to Jung. He was very disturbed in his personal life. Interestingly, he was still carrying on his scientific works, but his personal life was nearly on the verge of collapse. So he went there for a kind of maybe therapy or psychoanalysis.
Right.
But as soon as the two great minds met, they understood that something else is happening. It is not like therapy. It is like it has to be research. It has to be collaboration. And then Pauli was so much into understanding the subconscious, understanding the psyche, that he started really going through dreams, and he started really trying to understand archetypes and dreams, which we can elaborate more. And he was perhaps the first physicist, and maybe very rare physicist, who was actually using his dreams to understand more about physics. And this is something very surprising. And these things I got again from that book by
Kieran
Fox.
Fox.
So maybe you can highlight more on the psychoanalysis part and what Pauli called as archetypes.
Right, right. You meant what Jung used to call
Yeah.
it as archetypes. Yes, exactly. But I think this conversation has entered into a fascinating realm, and it would be very unfair of us, almost unethical, if we leave hanging these three, this triangulation of, on the one hand, the special theory of relativity, on the other hand, a patient coming to a psychoanalyst in the form of, in the expression of, to quote Sudip's pantheistic theory, in the expression of Wolfgang Pauli, and being cured by, or rather, being cured by some pantheist energy in the expression of Carl Jung, and finally archetypes. I was tempted to add that what Carl Jung formulated as archetypes also has a deep, genealogy born in the Indian subcontinent, but I will let that pass for today. I think, Shudip, what we planned off as one conversation has now clearly escalated, and we need to have another sitting to join the loose threads and to bring back Einstein, Wolfgang Pauli, Carl Jung, and India, and place them on the same table, right?
Yeah.
And to close the loop, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back very, very shortly with our next discussion, and hope to see you. And thank you for joining. I look forward to having you on the next podcast. And Shri, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So looking forward eagerly.